India is second to none when it comes to giving a befitting reply to terrorism and radicalization.
But a, a highly educated individual becoming a terrorist, and trying to justify suicide bombing, saying it's planned martyrdom, and using his religion, using Islam to justify this terror. Do we need to look at what is being taught at these masjids and madrasas? Do we need to look closer, deeper, and not just at what these Maulvis are teaching in some parts of our country, but where those Maulvis are being taught themselves?
Any teacher or any Maulvi or any Ustad who teaches in the Madrasa and goes on a tangent needs to know that there will be consequences and a minimum sentence of at least 10 years if he were to brainwash and radicalize children in his charge. We are proud of our Muslim brethren. We have forgotten, and we tend to, for such elements, tend to forget somebody as almost of divine characteristic, Rashtrapati Bharat Ratna APJ Abdul Kalam Sahab.
Absolutely.
Brigadier Usman Sahab, who refused to sleep on the bed unless he thought we'll get the occupied Kashmir back. Paramveer Chakravyuh Havaldar Abdul Hamid. How can we forget them and what they have done for the country and for the nation? They have made us so proud.
Doctors are considered second only to God. They are healers. But the doctors who are currently under the scanner in connection with the Red Fort blast in Delhi are literally devil incarnate if the evidence against them that the National Investigation Agency is putting together actually passes through judicial scrutiny. India is caught in midst of this Chakravyuh of radical Islamist terror, and the suspected terrorists are highly educated. Can India navigate this Chakravyuh and come out of it? Joining me on this Chakravyuh special podcast is Dr. Vikram Singh, former Director General of the Uttar Pradesh Police, Chancellor of the Noida International University, and very few people know as DIG Meerut. He was leading the team that arrested Muhammad Omar Sheikh, the number 2 of Al Qaeda, one of the world's most dreaded terrorists, also had a role in the 9/11
9/11,
terror
yes.
attacks. Sir, welcome on the Chakravyuh podcast.
Thank you very much, Gauravji, for having me on your prestigious platform. God bless you. God bless your platform. Thank you.
Sir, the doctors who've been taken into custody, you saw the statement of Dr. Muhammad Umar Nabi, your reading of his mindset. You've dealt with terrorists who've been highly educated. So let's talk about Dr. Nabi first, and I'll come to the broader picture. How tough is the situation that India is in right now?
The situation, Gauravji, has always been tough for the last 30 years, as I can imagine. Post 1990, I have seen these disturbances and these fault lines emerging. Less or more, that depends upon the current communal threshold. If it is low, well, even a small incident can trigger off a communal situation. If it is high and there's a resilience in the society, which there is, because India is second to none when it comes to giving a befitting reply to terrorism and radicalization. But to your first question, how do I look at the statement? The statement, which I would say almost a minute plus long on his mobile phone. But before you analyze the statement itself, please go into the details of his dress, his demeanor. Where was it located from? It was located from his mobile phone, which he gave to his brother and said it has to be destroyed. So the very fact that he himself wanted that statement to be destroyed goes to show that perhaps he was very unsure, diffident, as also he had his own reservations, goes to show he was not perhaps thinking that what he did was right. Now coming to the statement. It is said that it was made in Al Falah hostel, Al Falah University hostel. You can see a very frugal and a modest background, a black shirt being hung in the rear. What equipment he was using was, I would not say it was futuristic, but pretty advanced in the sense like Bluetooth headphones and others, a regular mic. So he was preparing himself to give a statement to go into posterity and remembered by posterity. The statement that he gave, there are 2 or 3, I would say 4 very important features which all of us need to observe. Stuttering, stammering, coming out in fits and starts with a cultivated anglicized accent, and then also fidgeting and clearing his nose.
What does that indicate?
That indicates perhaps a conjecture, but a very reliable one, that perhaps one is addicted to substance abuse. That is why then the twitching of the facial muscles, twitching of the facial muscles, nose that is running, clearing of the nose, lack of confidence, and indeed anyone who has dealt with substance abuse would know that there is a very short shelf life of substance intake and the consequences. I dare say that perhaps the impact of the substance seems to be wearing out, or perhaps the other hormones that took over perhaps gave him the lack of confidence. It is apparent that he lacked confidence to begin with, and that confidence ran out rather soon. Maybe after 35-40 seconds, there was absolutely, abysmally low confidence level, and there was no feeling good in whatever he was doing and saying.
And yet he carried out a terror attack. What would that show about his mindset? Because here is someone who's highly educated. Even in Kashmiri society or in any society, if you become a doctor, you're actually the cream of the society. You're working in different hospitals, though apparently investigations indicate he was sacked from GMC Anantnag for dereliction of duty, or words to that effect. He worked in Delhi but was frequently absent from work. But a a highly educated individual becoming a terrorist, and trying to justify suicide bombing, saying it's planned martyrdom, and using his religion, using Islam to justify this terror. What is your reading of that?
I'm not surprised. Jaish-e-Mohammed and those across the border, one, and secondly, within India, also the likes of Dr. Zakir Naik and other Imams of Shopian and others would like to radicalize, and we have absolute records with the NIA and other investigating agencies, and that there is an insidious and a malignant plan to radicalize the youth of Islam. A grand religion, a wonderful religion, and I'm sure we have interacted with wonderful soldiers and officers who have been Muslims, but immensely more patriotic, whose patriotism is second to none. But the dangerous part is that there are easy preys within the community also, and they are perhaps so gullible that they take the Maulvis and the Imams and the likes of Zakir Naik on face value. Whether it is life after death, akhirat, or perhaps the grace that the Almighty would give with such an end. This is all falsehood, because I have done a bit of my homework, and was lucky and fortunate to be with people who know what they're talking about. This wonderful religion, they say that committing suicide again is something that is just not acceptable in Islam. Therefore, the concept of committing suicide, for whatever be the cause, is just not justified. But religion apart, there are those satanic people who would perhaps twist the religion to their own advantage and create a narrative that will suit their purpose. Around the 10th century, there was certain literature that people would be fed with drugs to be made and manufacture of fidains, and then they would be subjected to drugs, and also exposed to certain women, good looking women, said that these are the hoods that you are on the verge of getting them, so as to give them in a state of stupefaction, in a state of intoxication. They are also mesmerized into believing that this end is indeed worth trying for. And this is not for the first time that it has happened. Starting from the 10th century onwards, when the creation of fidain started, as now, I would tell you that fidain attacks, the terror and the cascading effect it has on society is immense and very, very negative. Therefore, I would say those sitting across the border, the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, and others also who acting as fifth columnists and are also the sleeper cells, would like to have a reservoir of fidains and those of suicide bombers, so that in the time of need, in this case too, you would be aware that there was a design to have 32 blasts right across the country, and the
Yes.
code name given was D6.
D6.
D6. 32 blasts where? Ajodhya, Delhi, Red Fort, Gauri Shankar Mandir, the Gurdwara, and other such iconic places. It's a good thing that the investigating agencies had the better of these people. But to your question, how can educated people be radicalized? To your question, I would say all across the world, including that woman physiologist and biochemist who shot dead at American Marines in Afghanistan and is now in American prisons. She's one of the most reputed biochemists in the world, but
Yeah.
she chose to become a terrorist. Osama bin Laden himself was an engineer.
Yes.
Zawahiri himself was highly educated.
And a doctor and a medical doctor, Dr. Aman Al Zawahiri. So in India, when you talk about this module of doctors, are they emotionally weak? Are they mentally weak? I mean, why did they get radicalized? So there is this Imam of Naugam Masjid who was also a paramedic who's been taken into custody. Irfan, apparently his
Irfan,
name is
yes.
Irfan. So he's been taken into custody. Being a paramedic, he was able to indoctrinate these elements. But what are they? Are they mentally weak, emotionally weak, weak from their families? Why would they become terrorists and others wouldn't?
You have hit the nail on the head, and I must compliment you for that. Wherever this system of radicalization happens, a moment of emotional weakness, some family background, or some trauma that seems to be impacting the subject, that is why. Go to England, where the Pakistani grooming gangs only targeted those women who were emotionally unstable, mentally in state of agitation, or some family problem, widowed, divorced, deviant children, financial issues, and they would only attack and they only subject them to radicalization. Likewise, in India, there has to be some problem, and I would certainly advise the investigating agency to find out why, amongst all the doctors, they picked up these, whether it was financial, emotional, or some other problem that they had. That is why they become willing accomplices or accessories to this insidious design.
Because the module, is that an apprehension? It could be far bigger than the number of doctors who've been taken into custody. I'm told doctors have been taken into custody in different parts of the country, including in Punjab, in Uttar Pradesh, where a lady doctor, and you've headed the Uttar Pradesh police, a lady doctor and her brother have been taken into
Madam
custody.
Surgeon, Dr. Shaheen.
Dr. Shaheen and her brother, Dr. Ansari. Uh, could this be a much bigger module? Are we actually sitting on a ticking time bomb?
Very much. I can tell you for sure that you can see from the background that they are not very well today and they don't have deep pockets. And I'm talking of Dr. Shaheen of Lucknow, a very modest background. Obviously, the money that they got, and I'm given to understand that they got lakhs, but obviously those lakhs were not used for personal benefit or advantage, because obviously had that money passed on, because both the doctors, money did not go to the family. Perhaps they used it only for their own illegitimate purposes. Now, to the fact that Dr. Shaheen, and to presume that this is the end of the problem, would be living in a fool's paradise. I would repeat, if any were to believe that this module, the Mammoth Index, exposed excellent policing investigation done by our investigators, but this seems to be just the tip of the iceberg, and a greater investigation, incisive investigation, will have to be done. And how will that be done? My advice again would be thorough interrogation, both physical as also, when I say physical, it means face to face. Then using technology like narco analysis and polygraph tests. Then follow up. One follow up will give you at least 5 or 6 leads, and a single lead followed up will give you another 10 leads. So it is a gold mine of information. And to your question, perhaps we'd be able to address this once this investigation goes ahead, and maybe after 30-35 days, we would be in a better position to address how many more have been radicalized and have been inducted in this devious group.
Now, there is one Naugam masjid that we know where some of these doctors got indoctrinated. But Dr. Shaheen, Dr. Ansari, the doctors who were taken into custody, for example, near Pathankot or in other parts of the country, some interrogated, some not, like the doctor in Gujarat who was trying to make that chemical bomb, raisin bomb,
Raisin.
raisin bomb. It would indicate they're being indoctrinated at different places. How many enemies within our country?
You see, at a given point of time, we are not China or Singapore. We have our own system and the constitutional guarantee of practicing one's religion. Our laws are not so stringent. But rest assured, had this thing happened in China, firstly, this would not have been allowed. And if it had happened, you would know the consequences, that all these doctors, that the cohorts and those the special interest groups that were propping them up, they would have gone into the past tense by now. You would not have heard of them. A one-way ticket behind bars, and then nobody would have heard of them. We can't do such things, and we need not, and we will not, because we are capable of handling such sticky situations, such demanding situations within the ambit of law, and we have done that. You see, what to talk of de-radicalization, when we apprehended the terrorists, whether ISI agents or others, and they are in the custody of the ATS or the STF, they are subjected to sanity, the first thing that happens is that they run out of the addiction and they run out of the drugs. The first thing that it is like a person who has run out of intoxication after maybe consuming 6 or 7 pegs of whiskey. Then he starts howling and crying. Then he realizes what detrimental action he has, what detrimental things he has been up to. Then comes the sense that perhaps we get an imam, we get somebody who tells him in his own words, in his own language and philosophy, which he perhaps will be more enabled to, that what is the right path, what is good for him, what is good for his family. And lo and behold, the success rate of such interaction has been 95% plus. I have yet to come across any case. I've been told, but my personal example has been that when you catch hold of terrorists, ISI agents, and other such radical elements, subjecting them to the right kind of exposure to their own faith, in fact, has very, very profound and positive impact.
Okay. However, do we need to look at what is being taught at these masjids and madrasas? Do we need to look closer, deeper, and not just at what these Maulvis are teaching in some parts of our country, but where those Maulvis are being taught themselves? Where are they getting their knowledge from? Where are they getting their information from? Because I am told that they're still being taught Ghazwa-e-Hind. Your reading of what is Ghazwa-e-Hind, if they're still teaching Ghazwa-e-Hind living in Hindustan, isn't that a cause for grave concern?
I'm happy you've raised this question. Officially speaking, there are 38,000 madrasas in the country, 28,000 that are registered and 10,000 that are unregistered. This is the official statement. But the unofficial is, it is difficult to find a single locality or village that does not have a madrasa. Therefore, the unofficial figures would exceed 5 lakhs. What they are teaching, they are not covered by the NCRT. They are not covered by the syllabus prescribed by the government. They have their own syllabus, which would include Ghazwa-e-Hind and other such debatable and questionable and absurd subjects. I would not say debatable, but absurd topics. Therefore, it is only that the Child Rights Commission has said that each and every madrasa in the country should come within the ambit of prescribed syllabus and monitored very well. And I would also go a step further, that any Maulvi, any teacher who propagates the absurd concept of Ghazwa-e-Hind, Bahattar Hoor, and other such absurdities, are killing an infidel or a kafir, must not only be sent to jail, but be made an offense. It should be made an offense within the law, so that any teacher or any Maulvi or any ustad who teaches in the madrasa and goes on a tangent needs to know that there will be consequences and a minimum sentence of at least 10 years if he were to brainwash and radicalize children in his charge.
You know, because while you deal with the enemies across the border, whether it's Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Pakistan's ISI, Pakistan Army, similar elements in Bangladesh, if you have similar elements within our country, then the problem is magnified multifold, sir.
Very much. You go to the history of the madrasas. Pakistan was not as bad as it is today. When they decided to go and fight the then USSR in Afghanistan, then perhaps it was a considered policy, both of the CIA and the ISI, to promote such Talibanization of their education. Will you sow a wind and you reap a whirlwind? You had such a harvest of Talibanis that it is difficult to contain. The Frankenstein is out of the bottle and the genie is out. It is no longer possible to contain the terrorism that has emerged in Pakistan. Similar experiment, the infection, has come into our country also. They thought it was a wonderful model. To create a madrasa, not much is required. A single room, a Maulvi with rudiments of scriptural knowledge, and then the madrasa begins. And then there will be no dearth of those who contribute by way of zakat, by way of charity, because it is expected of every devout Muslim to pay a part of zakat, and also during the period of fasting to feed the needy.
But we need to check where that zakat is coming from and whether
Precisely.
in the name of zakat, terror is being funded. So Enforcement Directorate and other agencies, financial investigation agencies, need to step in a much bigger way.
Gauravji, if you and I were to have just half a truckload of bricks outside our gates, rest assured 10 agencies would come and say, Kya banwa rahe hain? What are you trying to construct? Where is the master plan? Where is the building? I would expect the same set of rules that apply to you and me, to everybody in this country, irrespective of caste, creed, and religion. That is not asking for the moon. But yes, if there has to be a standard application of rule of law, there has to be uniformity, and we have to check, contain, and decimate radicalization, then this is the least we can do for ourselves.
I also want to understand from you the enabling ecosystem for terror. the entire focus has been on the likes of Dr. Muhammad Umar Nabi, Dr. Adil, Dr. Shaheen, Dr. Ansari, people who've been taken into custody. But then, what would you say of those political leaders who say, oh, this is trauma of Kashmir that is reflecting in Red Fort, or words to that effect, or saying that, oh, because something's happening in Kashmir, you are seeing impact in Delhi, because there has been injustice, or those who are saying, oh my God, this is targeting of Muslims in India. Are they, in your view, trying to shield these culprits by and doing great disservice to Islam by linking these elements to Muslims in general and Islam?
Gaurav ji, it's a very major and a very potent question you have put, and there are 3 or 4 parts I would like to address that. Number one, what is my motive of shielding rank criminals and outlaws with this level of enthusiasm that they can do no wrong? And it is not their fault, it is Kashmir's fault and the government's fault always. If he has done an attack and killed 12 innocent Indians, well, it is the government's fault and they are being persecuted. They are the same people who in the next breath would say, Yasin Malik Sahab. I will not name the channel, I'll name the politician, but I'll name the politicians because it is not in my interest to conceal their identity. And Mehbooba Mufti, Abu Azmi, Dalwai, and then there's another stalwart of a leading political party, Hafiz G, Osama G. I don't say that there's so much of affection, but I would say that vote bank politics, this is what makes them do what they are doing, because they thrive on this kind of nonsense that they have to support the criminals of their community because they have no option. And since they have no option, it is their compulsion. And since the compulsion is there, what option does the nation have to do with them? You have chosen to be on the side of the terrorists, not a word of sympathy for the deceased, not a word of condemnation. You see, what I strongly object to is not a word of condemnation, not a word of sympathy for the deceased. ये बेचारे गरीब हमारे नौजवानों के साथ जुल्म ज्यादती हो रही है। जुल्म ज्यादती तो दरअसल हमारे देश में हो रही है। जुल्म ज्यादती तो उनके साथ हुई है जो बेचारे बेगुनाह बेमौत मारे गए. Not a word of sympathy. I don't expect this imported sympathy from people who have nothing to give except hypocrisy and reinforce their vote bank politics. And they are the same people who have not only added to the number of illegal Bangladeshis and migrants. ये हमारी अमानत है. अगर ये आपकी अमानत है और वो भी आपकी अमानत है जो terrorist हैं, please tell me, where do you stand when it comes to patriotism and being committed to the cause of India, that is Bharat? I'm sure their families would be ashamed of having somebody
unless
like
they're
them.
complicit, because I would be, as an Indian, I'm very concerned if they think that they will get Muslim votes in India by saying Osama G and Hafiz G. What are they equating Indian Muslims with? Is this their thinking? Or if people are giving intellectual cover fire to actions of radical Islamist terrorists, how are they any different? I mean, this is 50 shades of being a terrorist yourself if you're an overground worker or a terror supporter. Do we need to call out these elements? Because enough is enough of bleeding our people, our country, and justifying it in the name of whatever they may seek to do so, sir.
Very much, Gaurav ji. We are proud of our Muslim brethren. We have forgotten, and we tend to, for such elements, tend to forget, are somebody as almost of divine characteristic, Rashtrapati Bharat Ratna APJ Abdul Kalam Sahab.
Absolutely.
Brigadier Usman Sahab, who refused to sleep on the bed unless he thought we'll get the occupied Kashmir back. Paramveer Chakravyuh Havaldar Abdul Hamid. How can we forget them? And what they have done for the country and for the nation. They have made us so proud, but they will not utter a single word about them. Have you noticed that?
True.
None of them who say Hafiz Ji and Osama Ji will ever take the name of Bharat Ratna APJ Abdul Kalam Sahab, Brigadier Usman Sahab, and Havaldar Abdul Hamid Sahab.
True.
They will only take the name of Hafiz Ji, Osama Ji, and
try to justify or shield the actions of these radical Islamist terrorists who
Precisely.
are killing innocent people, irrespective of what their motive is. Sir, you've dealt with it for a very long time. If I remember correctly, you were DIG Meerut when that Umar Said Sheikh was arrested. a major Al Qaeda terrorist responsible for 9/11, IC 814 hijack. He had to be released. Sir, can you tell us about that operation? Because education has nothing to do with better intelligence. These are highly educated chaps like these doctors, like Omar Said Sheikh, and they became terrorists.
Very true, Aurabji. I'm happy you reminded him because it said education has, because these boys are uneducated, they come from impoverished backgrounds. No. Sayyid Muhammad Umar Sheikh was a British national and a millionaire many times over, a product of London School of Economics. But he chose to become an Al Qaeda activist, and he was number two, second only to Osama bin Laden. Came to Delhi, had a sleeper cell, abducted three Britishers and two Americans, and they were released after a fierce encounter. Although we lost Inspector Dhrulal Yadav, Inspector Sahibabad, and a constable, we got a letter of appreciation from John Major, who was the Prime Minister of England, thanking us and also saying that Her Majesty's government's condolences. Look, Her Majesty's government sent her condolences. Here, not a word of condolence for the forces or the men who gave up their life, not a word of appreciation for SSP Srinagar, for Vikram Rathore, the inspector, not a word of appreciation. But yes, बेगुनाह नौजवानों के पीछे आंसू की बाल्टियां भरा बहा रहे हैं. Now, coming to the fact that this encounter happened, and I had the opportunity of interrogating this boy, Sayyid Muhammad Umar Sheikh, and the manner in which he was radicalized. Obviously, he must be the topmost level of radicalization, but he was with us for some time. And I could notice that after 10-15 days, I think the booth and the fever of radicalization came down to almost 60%. I would not say that it was something very substantial, but the fact of the matter is perhaps the intoxication and the negativity that perhaps ingested from other channels was denied to him within the confines of the jail. And yes, he was the same person who orchestrated the hijacking of the Indian Airlines plane, and Azhar Masood and he and other terrorists were released in Kandahar by our external affairs minister. As also, he was one person who sent $100,000 to Muhammad Atta before the 9/11 demolition, and he was a willing participant to that Twin Tower demolition, as also fully responsible for the murder of journalist Daniel Pearl in Pakistan.
Yes. Abducted him and then slit his throat.
Slit his throat. So that is the kind of, and to say that he was uneducated, no. Somebody who has passed out of London School of Economics, born of millionaire parents, well, you have to see why, in what way the wiring of his mind went wrong.
So, what way does the wiring of these elements go wrong? What is your reading?
Perhaps the commitment to the faith, take the matter of this American CIA asset of Pakistan,
That lady doctor.
Lady Doctor and others. They are valuable assets indoctrinated in a heady, because social media today has made matters even worse. There is so much of tsunami of negative literature, and you take this Zakir Naik for one. Then you have this Maulana Irfan, and there is a deluge of Pakistani imams who seem to be spouting venom and explaining what kind of Bage Basisht and the kind of hoors they would be for those who do this Fidain act. And they go, because a sense of decorum prevents me from saying whatever they must have uttered, and they are on record. But yes, for those who want to see what nonsense they're churning out, you only have to click, but I wouldn't advise you to click, because then you'd be deluged, you'd be, a tsunami of such negative information would hit you on a daily basis.
So, why can't we counter it by the correct perspective of Islam coming out from Islamic scholars in our country and across the world, and from the Muslim civil society? Or is that wrong to expect them to bring facts out in public domain and condemn these elements?
There is bound to be, and this is an experiment and an international best practice. What you have mentioned is an international best practice which is being undertaken by Singapore and some European countries, and we have our own Maulana Madani, we have other Maulanas, Wahiduddin, I don't know, but Maulana Wahiduddin also is a very mature voice, so as also Maulana Madani as well. But the question is, somebody has to provide them a platform and say that this is what we have to do. The elders in the society, the elders and the saner voices in the society will have to come forward, tell them that you are on the wrong path, and this is the right path of peace, brotherhood, and solitude.
In your appreciation, is this silence of complicity, is this silence of fear, or is this silence of indifference that year after year, decade after decade, innocent Indians are being killed by these radical Islamist terrorists in terror attacks? I mean, we've seen the Parliament attack, we've seen Akshardham temple attack, we've seen attacks across the length and breadth of our country, and now there's a new wave that's starting, there's a new cycle that appears to be starting.
Certainly, Gauravji, I see that the silence is a very loud silence, and I attribute two reasons to it. Number one, that it is fear. Fear of what? Retribution, and fear of unjust criticism. I take you back to almost 80 years before independence. There was a saying that any Muslim who wears a Congress cap is not a Muslim. I mean, I'm talking of the good old days of 347 days when it was said that any Muslim who wears a Congress cap is not a Muslim. Today also, that fear of that magnitude may not be there. But here there's fear of retribution, there's fear of attack. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad was a very patriotic Muslim. And you know what happened? An incident. The train in which he was traveling, it stopped at a particular station, and 4 or 5 students of AMU went to his room. Probably he thought they were his admirers and probably had come to garland him and they smeared all kinds of filth on his face and his beard. So if Maulana Abul Kalam could not be spared, then what to talk of lesser mortals that we are talking of now? But this has to be, the government has to give a platform, proper security, and also they should be made to speak and what is right and what is wrong. The nation has waited for too long, and society is waiting very eagerly to hear from you the voice of sanity.
You know, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in the context of Macaulay, spoke of 10 years, the next 10 years, that you decolonize the mind. Can we use a similar time period to de-radicalize the mind? Is that possible? Or is this silence of fear that it will not happen, we will have to learn to live with it?
Gauravji, it is very much possible. 90% of the people will hear to the voice of reason when you say that this is de-radicalization is no longer an option. It's a compulsion for everybody. Hindus or Muslims, like, it is a compulsion for everyone. And look, make no mistake about it, all of us have to stay together. Nobody can wish the other person away. We have to stay together. We have to stay like brothers. We have to stay and coexist. And therefore, it is better to live in peace and coexist. And if there are any vitiating atmosphere, that has to be addressed and set right. And who better than the saner and the mature elements in the society? What PM Modi had said was an absolute truth, but pertained to the Macaulay's saying that he converted India into a manufacturing house for British clerks. But today, the question of radicalization it is a reality. And the de-radicalization has to be done as is being done in Singapore and other European countries. And it is a success.
I will let that be the last word on this part of the show, that it is now time to start massive de-radicalization in a very transparent manner so that the entire world sees how India is doing it. It's been a success story. Remember, there were some madrasas, some Maulvis who were trying to radicalize youngsters in Maharashtra and in Karnataka and in Bengal and in Assam. But a massive de-radicalization drive started there, which is seen as highly successful, at least as of now. It now needs to be a nationwide effort by all for a better India. That's the only way we will come out of this Chakravyuh. So a massive de-radicalization, nationwide de-radicalization effort is required. It's been successful in several states, in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, in Kerala, in Assam, in several parts of the country. There have been examples that boys have been brought back, youth have been brought back from the brink. Hopefully, that will now be a nationwide offensive, which will be successful. Dr. Vikram Singh, as always, for joining me here on this Chakravyuh podcast. Many thanks, sir.
Thank you very much, Gauravji. You are Arjun and Gandhi are invincible. No Chakravyuh can hold you back.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.